to internally and complement my hair.
Okay, and don't forget, Simon Lau, when after you talking to Rinpoche or Venerable Carlson, and yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
איקי או תומר, אני רוצה לנסות לשים את האוזניות, ואני רוצה שתאמרו לי אם אתם שומעים אותי טוב יותר עם אוזניות. אז זה בלי אוזניות, ועכשיו אני מכניס את האוזניות. איך אתם שומעים אותי עכשיו?
אותו דבר.
טוב.
אותו דבר. אוקיי.
English, still I can hear Yaki. Because Yaki's going to be on the main channel. And he's going to be speaking while I'm... Maybe turn the sound off.
In English,
Yeah,
still can hear Yaki and Rinpoche.
exactly. But then when Rinpoche is finished, Yaki will speak.
Talk,
Yeah.
you
No,
press on
no, I know,
internal use.
I know that, Yaki. I know that. What I'm saying is when Rinpoche will talk, Yaki will then... Yes.
Okay. Yes, correct. For
All
Iki,
right. Can you hear me now? I hope that.
Yes.
Similar
Yeah.
issue before, and I
Yeah,
think
right.
what I resorted to was clunky. So that's what I had to do. I had to mute the main channel.
יקי, אתה
I
קצת
was talking.
מקוטע. יקי, אתה קצת מקוטע.
אני קצת מקוטע?
כן, אולי עניינים של אינטרנט.
אני על hotspot לטלפון, וזה הדבר היחידי שאני יכול לעשות פה.
בסדר, כרגע זה בסדר. קודם זה נתקע קצת.
תומר ובן, נתחיל.
כן, שומעים אותי? איקי, שומעים אותי? יופי. Second. Okay, so we'll begin. Welcome everyone. Rinpoche Deleg. Rinpoche is here, is not here. Rinpoche is not here yet, right? Iki? Okay, so I'll begin. Meanwhile, Rinpoche will join. So, Venerable Katzen, also known as Yaki, and Simon, and Sun Rinpoche, thank you all very much for being here and sharing the precious Dhamma with us. Today, we'll host a teaching on a very special text by Lama Tsongkhapa called Taking Suffering as a Path. And I will leave the presentation of the text and the presentation of the very special author of the text to our dear teacher, Tsenshab Serkong Rinpoche. So first, a few words on our teacher. So Tsenshab Serkong Rinpoche, when he was about 3 years old, he was recognized by His Holiness Dalai Lama as the reincarnation of Kyabje Tsenshab Serkong Tukse Rinpoche, who was one of the 7 masters who served as debate partners to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Rinpoche studied Buddhism in Ganden Jangtse Monastic University in South India, and later completed his education at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics in Dharamsala. Rinpoche is currently teaching in India and around the world, combining his experience of the study and practice of Buddhism with his familiarity with the Western world. And I'm sure we will all feel the wisdom and humor in his teachings in our next 2 days together. Rinpoche also visited and taught in Israel twice, in 2018 and 2023, and we hope he'll come to visit us again in the future. Now, I would like us to take a moment to reflect on the kind of hardships people had to go through in the past, just to hear a word of Dhamma. In the past, in order to invite the great teacher, Lama Atisha, also known as Lama Atisha Dipankara Shrigyana, to teach in Tibet, people had to travel all the way to India. And back then, of course, there were no cars, no airplanes, no concrete roads, nothing. Instead, there were just very dangerous mountain passes, ferocious rivers, wild animals, robbers, and so forth. Traversing this road took many months with a great risk of dying on the way. Still, they took the risk and went to invite this great teacher to Tibet, even though there was no guarantee that he would even accept their invitation. So thankfully, he did accept their invitation and was willing to travel all the way to Tibet in these very difficult conditions just to teach the Dhamma. Without their amazing enthusiasm back then and their courage, we would not get the opportunity to study here today, 1,000 years later, and get all the benefit that we get from the Dhamma, especially now in Israel in these difficult times for us. So nowadays, the Dhamma is very easily available. We don't have to go through all these hardships and dangers to get access to our teachers. We just need to open our laptops and click on the Zoom link. This is, of course, a great blessing for us. So I suggest let us take the advantage of this blessing. So with this in mind, unless we have some medical condition, in which case, please sit comfortably. Other than that, let's sit upright, be as attentive as much as we can so that we can get the benefit. I'm sure that Rinpoche wouldn't mind if we sit this way or that way. We wouldn't take that personally anyway. But for us, if we want to get the benefit, then we should be attentive, respectful, and so forth. And with that in mind, also, please open your cameras if you can. It will be a much nicer environment for all of us. Lastly, I would want to mention that Dhamma Friends of Israel is a non-profit organization that operates solely on donations and volunteers. So if you'd like to support the future activities of Dhamma Friends of Israel in whatever way you can afford and are happy to give, please see the links for donation in the chat box or in our website. And also, if you feel the wish to support our activities with some of your time and energy, we very much welcome volunteers to help us increase and improve our Dhamma activities. We are a relatively small team, and more helping hands will greatly help us to spread the Dhamma for the benefit of everyone. So if you'd like to join us, you have some spare time, or you just want to contribute in whatever way you can, please contact us. That's it from my side. So just a technical thing, for all those who are dependent on the English language, on the main channel, Yaki would translate in Hebrew. Rinpoche would speak in English and Tibetan, and Yaki would translate to Hebrew for the Israeli audience. And if you are dependent on English, please look at the bottom of your screen. There's a globe icon saying interpretation. So you click on it, and then you click on English, and then you'd be on the English channel, and you could hear Simon's translation in English. That's it. So with this, I would hand it over to Venerable Kama Tsunjula, also known as Kartsunla or Yakila, to lead the preliminary prayers. Thank you, everyone. Yaki, over to you.
Okay, so I'll say a few words in English before I switch on to Hebrew. And so I had a brief conversation with Rinpoche today. And Rinpoche, hello Rinpoche, I see you now on my screen. All of us are more than happy to see you. Thank you very much. And so Rinpoche advised that we could start with correcting a motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. We'll also recite the foundation of all good qualities. And now I'm thinking that we should also throw a mandala offering in. And so we'll do the recitation in Hebrew, but for those of you who are familiar with the English recitation, please do it on your own time. And so correcting motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. בבודה, בדרמה, בקהילה העילאית, אבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדרמה, לו השיג בודה.
By the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing virtuing and the perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And now is the four immeasurable thoughts, so the immeasurable thought of love, compassion, and the joy and the not wishing to be beings to be separated from happiness. So I haven't got the text up in front of me. May all sentient beings be parted from the suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be conjoined to the causes of happiness, and the happiness and the causes of happiness may never be separated from perfect joy, and may they, I forgot the third one. And may the equanimity, the measurable equanimity.
אזכור את המוות שהרי החיים ארעיים הם כמו בועה, קמלים במהרה. ולאחר מותי, כצל העוקב אחרי הגוף, יבואו בעקבותיי פעולותיי החיוביות והשליליות ותוצאותיהן. המוחלטת שמצאתי בכך, ברכן אינם כי לעולם מנהג את מצבור המעשים שאינם ראויים ולו הקטנים ביותר, והגשים את מצבור הפעולות החיוביות בשלמותו. חוסר סיפוק הוא השער לכל סבל. כשידע שנפלאות הקיום אינן מהימנות, לקויות הן, ברכן אינה שיקונן את הכמיהה הגדולה לאושר שבשחרור. באמצעות כוונה טהורה זאת, אשמור על שימת לב, דריכות ומצפוניות. ברכן אינה כי אשם את שורש התורה, התרגול המהותי של נדרי החירות האישית. כפי שנפלתי בעצמי לאוקיינוס הקיום, כך נפלו כל הנודדים אמהותיי. ביווכחי כך, ברכני נא כי אתאמן בתודעה הנשגבת של ההערה, הנוטלת בנטל שחרור כל הנודדים. אם אכונן את תודעת ההערה בלבד, אך לא אתרגל לשלושת סוגי המוסריות, לא אממש את ההערה. ברכני נא כי בהכירי בבירור שכך הוא, אתאמן בנדר הבודיסטווה בשקידה עצומה. ברכני נא שאפתח במהרה ברצף תודעתי את שילוב השהייה בשלווה והראייה החודרת, באמצעות הרגעת הסחת הדעת למושאים מוטעים, וניתוח נאות של המשמעות הנכונה. כאשר אהפוך לכלי ראוי באמצעות האימון בדרכים המשותפות, ברכני נא שיכנס בקלות במבואה של בני המזל, מוביל הוואג'רה הנשגב ומובילים. ואז בסיס מימוש שני ההישגים המיוחדים הוא הגנה על הנדרים וההתחייבויות הטהורים. ברכני נא שאמצא החלטיות שאינה מאולצת בכך, ושאגן עליהם כעל חיי. כך, כשאביא נכוחה כפי שהם בין שני השלבים, מהות מחלקות הטנטרה, ואת נקודות המפתח שלהם. ברכני נא שאשקוד על תרגול יוגה מבלי לחרוג מ4 פעמים ביום, בהם אתרגל בהתאם להוראות המורה הנעלה. לפיכך, אנא ברך שהחברים הרוחניים שמראים את הדרך, והשותפים לדרך שמתרגלים כהלכה יאריכו ימים, ושאשכח עד תום את מצבור המכשולים החיצוניים והפנימיים. בכל עדותיי, בלתי נפרד מאלמות אמיתיים, לא אעסוק בדרמה המהוללת, אשלים את כל מעלות הרמות והדרכים, ואשיג במהרה את מצב הוואג'רדרה. And just before starting the teachings, we would like to offer a brief mandala offering for Rinpoche as a token for requesting the teachings. Sashi, Pögi Junshin
Let
Meto.
out umbrella intention the about the sentence.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Simon ki video de kurio tang mendo. Simon kugudu we.
Go to. Go.
Pige de kud English ba. Simon kugudu we. Simon kuguyo nemen hagu mudo. Ya laso. Ta manche kuguyo sire. Ta 또 인지 잡고이나 배그 잡샤고 있나? 그렇잖아. 여기
Niga.
네가
Nika ra.
Karola English di Rinpoche Kyungwa ina nga de pe hlulu chagirda.
좋아. 야.
First of all, it is so good to see you all in this modern technology. Through this modern technology, we can, in the past, we have met online, and now this time we go through the Zoom. So actually, we need to thank the Zoom people who making our connection very close. And most importantly, I think now the whole world, if you look at from the top of the Himalaya, so and to all the way around, the world is going a little bit crazy, more crazier. But somehow we can say that some of people like us, we can say a little bit proudly that somehow we are staying very strong, not through only just worldly thinking, but with the support of Dharma. And now, as time to time, because our like a person like me, time to time we need some kind of a watering as a seed. We need some to water the plant to grow. So it is necessary. We need to hear some Dharma, share Dharma, contemplate, and then meditate. So today, through the kindness of Dharma friends of Israel, we could meet again and then share Dharma and 얘기를 좀 물어봐.
거기도 rinpoche yang peshe di rinpoche inchi ke di Hebrew ke tola peshe gyu yang gyu 거기도.
오케이. 아니
Yeah.
אז rinpoche ידבר איתנו גם באנגלית וגם בעברית. אני חושב שיש תועלת גם בתרגום של אנגלית לעברית, שיהיה לנו לפחות את המצגת השלמה. אז rinpoche קודם כל התחיל בלומר שנחמד, טוב לראות את כולנו היום. מאחר ואנחנו נהנים מטכנולוגיה מודרנית שמאפשרת לנו לשמוע שיעורים לא רק באונליין, אלא במיוחד בזום, ואנחנו אסירי תודה לאלה שהמציאו את הטכנולוגיה של הזום. זה מאפשר לנו להתחבר אחד לשני פה בצורה אדוקה, בצורה קרובה אחד לשני, אחד לשנייה. במיוחד בימים אלה שכאשר לא רק בעולם באופן כללי, אלא גם אפשר לומר גם באזור ההימאליה, אנשים חווים קשיים, או רימפוצ'ה אומר שאנשים הופכים להיות יותר ויותר משוגעים או מטורפים, אז אנחנו בעולם שכזה אנחנו צריכים שיהיה לנו משהו שנוכל להסתמך עליו, להסתייע בו. לא רק בדרכי חשיבה שהן מקופלות בעולם, אלא במיוחד להסתמך על הדרמה, להסתייע או להסתמך על הדרמה. ורימפוצ'ה אומר שבן אדם כמוהו, הוא צריך להסתייע על הדרמה, שזה כמו להשקות את הזרעים, להשקות זרעים במים, לתת לזרעים לנבוט או לצמחים לגדול. כדי שנוכל להסתייע בזה, כדי לשמוע, לחלוק אחד עם השני, אחד עם השנייה, לחשוב על זה, למדות על זה. אז היום מי שמאפשר לרימפוצ'ה לחלוק את זה איתנו, הם ידידי הדרמה באדיבותם. אז טוב להיפגש פה היום ושוב לחלוק את הדרמה אחד עם השני, אחד עם השנייה. לעשו רימפוצ'ה.
So, and now many people in this screen, I can see familiar faces. So we are good old friends. So yeah, and then also you know my style of teaching. You might also have understanding of my quality. So I'm not a great teacher or qualified practitioner or teacher, but somehow I do have this title called Rinpoche. And if somebody has a title of Rinpoche, automatically he gets advantage of maybe he's a good teacher. So, and then Dharma friend is a very old friend, and my teacher, Gen Gyatsola, is one of your main teachers of all. So now, to repay Genla's kindness and His Holiness Dalai Lama and my teachers' kindness. So the best thing is to share Dharma, and especially today's topic, how to take the obstacles into the path. Very profound, but I cannot explain fully, very profoundly, but I will try my best. So this opportunity I got through Dharma Friends of Israel, and especially people who are attending this course who does have intention and a motivation to hear to this. So thank you for all.
רימפוצ'ה מסתכל על המסך מולו ואומר שהוא רואה מולו פרצופים מוכרים, חברים ותיקים, חברים ישנים, אז אנחנו מכירים את הסגנון של הלימוד של רימפוצ'ה, אנחנו חלקנו, רובנו גם מכירים את תכונותיו ואת המעלות של רימפוצ'ה. קודם כל רימפוצ'ה אומר שאין לו מעלות עצומות, מעלות נשגבות, אין לו מעלות של מורה שהוא מורה מוסמך או מורה מיומן, אבל יש לו את התואר רימפוצ'ה, ועבורנו כל מי שיש לו את התואר רימפוצ'ה בצורה אוטומטית אנחנו רואים אותו כמישהו שאולי הוא מורה טוב. המורים שלימדו אותנו בעבר בידידי הדרמה הם גם חלק ממוריו של רימפוצ'ה, לדוגמה גנגי אצו. גנגי אצו הוא אחד מהמורים הוותיקים שלנו בידידי הדרמה. אז כאן רימפוצ'ה אומר שהוא חושב על מוריו, לא רק גנגי אצו, אלא גם כבוד הדלאי למה ומורים אחרים. אחת הדרכים הטובות ביותר, אולי הדרך הטובה ביותר לגמול להם על טוב ליבם, הוא לחלוק את הדרמה איתנו, את הדרמה שרימפוצ'ה למד מהם. במיוחד כשאנחנו חושבים על המפגש שלנו היום, במיוחד בתקופה הזאת שאנחנו חווים הרבה מכשולים, ואנחנו יכולים להביא את המכשולים האלה לתוך הדרך הרוחנית שלו. יש לנו הוראות מאוד מעמיקות על האופן שבו אפשר להביא את המכשולים האלה לתוך הדרך הרוחנית שלנו, ורימפוצ'ה אומר שלמרות שהשיעורים עצמם או השיעור עצמו שנלמד היום הוא מאוד מעמיק, רימפוצ'ה אומר שהוא בעצמו לא יכול להסביר את זה בצורה מעמיקה מספיק, אבל הוא יעשה את המרב כמרב יכולתו כדי לעשות את זה, ומי שמאפשר לנו לעשות את זה, לשמוע את ההוראות האלה היום, זה ידידי הדרמה, באמצעות התמיכה של ידידי הדרמה. אז במיוחד עבור אלה מאיתנו, שיש לנו את הכוונה, יש לנו את המוטיבציה לשמוע את השיעור הזה, אז תודה רבה, רימפוצ'ה אומר, לכל אלה שהגיעו לכאן היום, התחברו אלינו היום, כדי לשמוע את השיעור שעוסק בהבאת המכשולים אל תוך הדרך לסולה.
So now starting from today, tomorrow, whether you like or not, you need to see my face. So now we are kind of like going to work together. I won't have a motivation like I am a teacher. I want to teach you. And you don't need to listen like I'm a student. I will listen to this teacher. But it's more like we need to work together, teamwork. That's what I'm asking. So for this reason, now to set towards this journey, we need to have this strong motivation, pure motivation. I'm saying this because not getting tired to my boring talk, or maybe I cannot bring lots of to entertain you well, but a right motivation, setting a right motivation will make everything very, very easy. So now let's check our motivation. Now we are going to listen to and discuss about Dharma, not to gain something, a name or wealth, or or maybe for especially now this period of time, you people all are going through a very specific suffering, which is the war. So it's not only to instantly make this go away, but somehow it is a very important. The worst thing that what we have here, the hatred, and then a clinging. So all this, the Lama Tsongkhapa in the three principal aspects of the path. In there, he said, we're saying the real war, which is something that makes very unhappy, is inside you. So that now we need to reduce. So from that, we can bring peace to ourselves and to others. So for this reason, our goal is, the big goal is to get a fully enlightenment. This little bit difficult, but let's say the easier is the Dharma is not only going to talk about getting a liberation and fully enlightenment, but it also gives you how to tame, how to calm your mind through the daily practice, that how can you use your mind very calmly, gently, even the environment is not very doing so well. So this is we are going to discuss about the Dharma. So we all should be very fortunate that thousands years ago, all the great master has worked, and it is a kind of some kind of they made a kind of examination whether it is helpful or not, and up to here the great His Holiness the Dalai Lama, all are saying it is working. So now it is to us whether it is working or not. We need to not just accept this as like, oh, the great master said it. We have to use our own brain and mind and heart, put it in there and check. So let's do it.
So just one thing to add to that Rinpoche quoted from J. Rinpoche's three principal aspects of the path, and he quoted this verse. He quoted a couple of lines, not the full verse, where he talked about J. Rinpoche talks about being ensnared within the iron trap of their self-grasping and enshrouded in the thick darkness of ignorance. Again and yet again, they are born in limitless samsara. So those are the verses, the last two lines of verse 7, and the first lines of verse 8.
אנחנו רוצים להתחיל את הדרך הזאת קודם כל עם מוטיבציה שתהיה מוטיבציה חזקה ומוטיבציה טהורה. אנחנו אומרים את זה כי יכול להיות שאנחנו נמצא את
Can the English channel listeners hear me at all? I have a feeling they can't hear me at all.
יכול להיות שהוא לא נמצא אותו משעשע או entertain, משהו כזה, הוא לא ישעשע אותנו, אבל ריבוץ' אומר שאנחנו לא מקשיבים לשיעור הזה כדי למצוא את ריבוץ' משעשע או מעניין, אלא אנחנו רוצים לעשות את זה עם מוטיבציה תהיה מוטיבציה נכונה. לעשות את זה, לכונן את המוטיבציה בצורה נכונה היום. והמוטיבציה שלנו שהיא מוטיבציה נכונה צריכה להיות כזאת שלא מעורבת עם רצון למצוא, להשיג איזשהו פרופיט, איזשהו רווח שהוא רווח אישי מתוך הלימוד הזה. אנחנו לא רוצים לצבור, לעשות שם לעצמנו, מוניטין לעצמנו, או לצבור ממון וכולי. באופן יותר ספציפי, מאחר וכרגע בתקופה הנוכחית אנחנו חווים בישראל מצב שהוא מצב של מלחמה, אנחנו רוצים שהמוטיבציה שלנו תהיה כזאת שהיא לא רק מעורבת בשיעור הזה כדי למצוא פתרון מאוד ספציפי למלחמה שמתרחשת כרגע באזור שלנו. במובן הזה כשאנחנו מסתכלים לדוגמה על מה שאנחנו חווים כרגע עם תודעה שהיא תודעות של אנשים באזור שלנו, של תודעות של כעס היום והשתוקקות או החזות עצומה. אחד הדברים שאנחנו קושרים את המוטיבציה שלנו איתה היום, זה אחד השיעורים של למה צונקפה, בשלושת ההיבטים העיקריים של הדרך, שבה למה צונקפה דיבר על בעלי התודעה, אמותינו בעלי התודעה, שהן אפופות כליל בחשיכה הגדולה של הבערות. אז כשאנחנו מכוננים את המוטיבציה של היום, אנחנו חושבים על כך שאנחנו חייבים להפחית בבערות, חשקת הבערות שאופפת. אז זה התפקיד הגדול שלנו. כמובן שאנחנו מדברים, כשאנחנו מכוננים את המוטיבציה, שהמוטיבציה שלנו היא כזאת ששואפת להערה גדולה או לחירות מסמסרה, אבל גם מעבר לזה, כשאנחנו מסתכלים, בוחנים את הדרמה באופן יותר ספציפי, יש לנו שיעורים גדולים שהדרמה מלמדת אותנו, שמסייעים לנו לאלף את התודעה, לרסן את התודעה, להשכין שלווה בתודעה, וזה משהו שאנחנו רוצים לעשות בחיי היום-יום שלנו. לפתח תודעה שהיא יותר שקטה, יותר רגועה, גם כאשר מסביבנו, בסביבה מסביבנו, הדברים לא פועלים כשורה. אז אנחנו נשוחח על זה היום ומחר. אנחנו מאוד, יש לנו, we are very fortunate, אנחנו ברי מזל שיש לנו את האפשרות לעסוק בזה. יש לנו את האפשרות לעשות את זה כי גם מאסטרים של העבר, מורים של העבר, עבדו קשות, הם לא רק הם למדו את השיעורים האלה, הם גם בחנו אותם והם מצאו את השיעורים האלה כמועילים. אנשים או מאסטרים כמו הדלאי למה וכולי. אז אנחנו רואים בשיעורים האלה ובכינון המוטיבציה של להקשיב לשיעור כזה, שיהיה שיעור מועיל עבורנו, לא כשיעור מועיל כמישהו אחר כמו הדלאי למה אמר שהוא מועיל, אלא אנחנו רוצים שהמוטיבציה שלנו תהיה כזאת שמעומק ליבנו, כשאנחנו בוחנים את זה עם המוח שלנו, עם התודעה שלנו, מעומק ליבנו אנחנו רוצים לעסוק במשהו שישכין שלום בתודעה שלנו, שירסן או יאלף את התודעה שלנו. אסולה.
Hola. Now I think I will switch my language to Tibetan. I feel a little bit more comfortable. Okay. Then Tama friend to be Israel so that chale nan khen mang che ji ani Quran zo samaro nam sha gyun du ne chabe se ya da nyam len che nam de zo be ya go do ba de yun du yang ji gi shamba da man ra ba de kar so re ngal ji shero chi sung be ka ba ni kar chi ya go re kiran zo ngal homo san ro ji na ro na si je nam gyu ni de Quran zo ri gyu chi yu 아니 kuranzu kajin teche ane shung je manyo nye jigita gewe kanju rinpoche ni chunbe ni tenju rinpoche nanglo ne dang ane jige yarshi sunggu tal habado taring sunrupche na je rinpoche ge sung ame chi karso sung turbu nanglo ya shude kengi ane jige genyen lamdo longya ki ane tenju duzu je ya kogo shu chungru chazangla 담아프는 알을 뺏거니 첨비.
Rinpoche says that most of the people associated with the Dharma Friends of Israel group are obvious people and the workers and the administrators and those associated with Dharma Friends of Israel group are already people who have had quite a sort of good experience of studying and also a very I've done a very reasonable amount of practice, so they have good studying, good practice, and so they're a kind of different, a little bit sort of different to the average kind of person. So that when they were requesting me to give this teaching, it was almost like I felt them almost like they also give me a little bit kind of homework because because they'd sort of asked me to, out of all the kind of great genres of text from the precious Tangir, the precious Tengir, and then and all of the different kind of texts, they asked me to give a teaching on a text by Lama Tsongkhapa, which comes from a kind of it's a kind of associated text that is called the Torbu in Tibetan. It means this associated text. It's a sort of apart from J. Rinpoche's main kind of treatises, there's a kind of smaller annotated and kind of associated text, and this text called taking this is a few instructions on taking something into the path comes from that, and so actually have a great opportunity. I feel a great sense of gratitude at the opportunity to take a look at this text, which was unknown to me before. So it's a kind of like a homework and almost a homework for me from these experienced people.
단대 차비기 제르미치게 챈들이야 동해 람도 노베 당와 용무세지 디 네 고 용서트비다 아니 제제 준주기 셜로가 니슈저지 기나로네 주 자와 중흥로 되면로 시지 티샤 다다 이면의 미신데 이내야 디 삼무당의 시 자침으로 봐. 네, 개침으로 맞아. 시부지 가죠. 그래서 가도 임비 이내야 아니 개버지기 송디 제르무지기 송로지나 준주나라 야 공도야. 준주기디 아니 건주나라 야 공도야. 도스 야 공도야 딩아도 시부지 장고야지. 네, 개침으로. 난디 답자지 리기 유명한 도스타나 하고지. 잡으지도 세상가 르 단다 준주기 카도리아 아니 준주 카도라 아니 동해 체도 동해 탐지 체도 세네 시당라서 따좀 봤어요. 세제디 대화될 송도가 뒤에도 동해 탐지 체세 버렸어. 어디 직주로 하느냐.
So Rinpoche was saying that in terms of, if we take a look at the title of the text, which is by the text by the Lord Lama Tsongkhapa, and the title of the text is a few instructions, personal instructions or pith instructions on taking suffering into the path. And I think so Rinpoche is saying that I think that I'm not sure about this, but I have a feeling that it might be requested. It might be connected to the verses in Shantadeva's Way of the Bodhisattva. So I think the Rinpoche said verses 20 and 21, but I'll just check that at the end. So what Rinpoche is saying is that, J Rinpoche's work, there's a sense in which J Rinpoche's work comes out of or is encompassed by the texts such as the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, and in a sense those texts then kind of lead back into or inclusive or included in, but sort of come out of the Kanga itself, the actual sutra, the spoken words of the Buddha. So it's something that is important for us to it's important for us to sort of understand and learn this way in which there is a connection between the later works of someone like J Rinpoche and then the earlier sort of treatises in the Tengir like Shantideva and the Sutra.
No.
So I think it's the 20th and the 21st verse of Shantideva's first chapter, I believe, yeah. Leo Tambo,
가소에. Hello. Good way. Hello.
Rinpoche sunga di komasong in
어디
Rinpoche
디버리.
tanda sunga di pe chunjo resha.
아, 네. 달래송에. 레송에.
Radila
레송에. Hello.
리 디레샤.
리우투거리샤.
So it's from the sixth chapter of Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, and it reads, "Furthermore, suffering has good qualities. Though being disheartened with it, arrogance is dispelled. Compassion arises for those in psychic existence. Negativities are shunned, and joy is found in virtue." And also Rinpoche is quoting from the 20th verse as well. "The victorious heroes are those who, having disregarded all suffering, vanquish the foes of hatred and so forth. The rest slay corpses."
자세도 초도바 아니 지금 수수기고 강사지 약해요. 아니 강사 되기 아니 강사 때 라바들이야 표되지마도 아니 강사 되기 아니 묘몽기 왕기 용야들랑 아주 자원이 조금에도 제장을 거기 재단들을 맞춰배치 거기 재단 영상이 자와디 묘몽 인도 잠배 묘몽들을 처베이나 텔레파우스들이스 디마도 제게 아니 거기 삼로당당당 아니 거기 라셔주 시디 영사들로 콘로마 사베치 용샤주 슈베이나 수다 슈사르디 차샤베이나 에미 라바들 슈샤베이나 롤 슈베디 지버르지 말베 이제 준주기다 너무 침울해도 와야 돼. 세상은 중원에 미션바이기 삼로당당 치 두자도 라바도 소소고 오늘 전에 폭사디 가리를 포고를 쓰도 전에 그게 라우시 교기 치디 영단데 뉴모어 되는 레이션 뉴모어 포고 요리스. 제가 디 삼로들다 용야 체도 아니 다 경계 람도 롱야 될야 아주 베나 태과 중국이 아니 다 태과 중국슬람이 되거라 태과 중국다 첨부슬람이 되거든 중국이 아니 기부 중간 치 순간 슬람 되거든 기부 중국 ring 첨부 순간로야 인경에 람도 체다 마다
嗯
숨지 디네 고알렌 투서바
嗯 And so using these verses from the 6th chapter of Shantideva, so I'll just read them again very quickly. So sorry, I have to find them. What Rinpoche is saying, so the essence of these two verses, so thinking, Karsei, thinking, I'm reading a slightly different translation, I'm reading Padmakara, thinking scorn of every pain and vanquishing such foes as hatred. I'll read them from here. The victorious heroes are those who, having disregarded all suffering, vanquish the foes of hatred and so forth. The rest slay corpses. Furthermore, suffering has good qualities. Through being disheartened with it, arrogance is dispelled. Passion arises for those in cyclic existence. Negativities are shunned, and joy is found. So if we look at the sort of essence of this, and if we think about the, first of all, the way in the sort of ordinary people, so the first verse talking about the way that the victorious ones and how they conduct themselves, how they disport themselves, are they vanquish the foes of hatred and the rest slay corpses. So what it's talking about here is the kind of more enlightened ones don't act in the way which ordinary people would do in response to someone who gives us a kind of acts to us in aggressive or violent or aggressive manner, or also just in terms, not just in terms of kind of physical, but in terms of them speaking harsh words or unpleasant or harsh words to us. And what ordinary people do is to respond in the last verse of 620 explains. They slay the corpses, so they literally respond in a physical manner towards the physical person in front of them. Whereas those who are a little bit more understanding have this perspective that that person who is either aggressive, either in physically or verbally, is under the power of of their own kind of afflictions, their own afflictive emotions or mental afflictions. And of course, the ordinary people never think like this. But the way of the wise one or the kind of hero is to understand that it would be ridiculous to directly retaliate because that person, the other person is controlled. If there's anything that we would be angry towards, as it says, vanquishing the foes of hatred and so forth, so that of disregarding the suffering that comes from the other person, we would have this perspective that it is the hatred, underlying hatred, which has caused those actions, and that's what we, as in beings who are practicing these paths, would take pride in, is that understanding, and not a kind of direct retaliation, either physically or verbally, to their actions. And so this in this context, what we're talking about is essentially either taking suffering onto the path, or another phrase that is used is the taking of unconducive or negative conditions onto the path. So both of these are used, and these take place whether these practices can be located depending on the scale and the depth or breadth of the practice. These can be located either in any of the three vehicles, the vehicles of those of the lower scope, the vehicles of those of the middle scope, and the vehicles of those of the higher scope. So depending on the kind of depth or perhaps motivation of the practice, they can be located in those different vehicles.
디 타마들 때문에 동년 남도노에 당와 뉴무스라도 뉴무스에 수인이 거고요. 뉴무치 망고디 시다가 말와 세상과 동년 남도노 회사 내 당와 뉴무치 송 다디 요시도 봐.
אז
So
כאן
Rinpoche says and also there's a very indicative kind of phrase in the title which the title is, as you'll have the English with you, it says Ningnu. It says a few instructions on taking suffering onto the path, and in the Tibetan it says Damnak, which is the or kind of pith instructions or instruction Nyungnu. So it says it means a little and not too much, because we don't like too much. So it's it kind of already kind of I don't know how to say it, but it's sort of not overdoing it and not giving us too much. It says there's just a few instructions on taking suffering into the path, because we don't want to get on overload.
right. 디 가장 먼저 길라다 이기다 군수용업이야 디지 현재 제품은 야고도 송은 시제에 도지된이야 경고를 지군들이 추잉되버 슈 엔테네 두주 참래 맞다 시부지도 연구면도 맞다 이런 얘기요 봐. 현재가 도스 정도 준비하니 단다디 동일남도 놓으면 당간 용어들 아니 빼져다 뒤를 개라면도 슈구간의 차상 지제 아니 라발도 스케치 최대치도 거라적인 게 서머 단계 쉐비 빼야고 총수 당부 것도 그러네 아니 디네 개위 신님비 상안에 시제 제를 붙여려야 아니 디디지 송로지 송년디 그런기 연락시르도 봐 라마직르도 봐 저장가 진도 준비 다 라마직이 아니 라마직을 송로지 실도 준비 달람 소소 라마디 문다디 쇼지 따주도 봐 디급기 주주 될래야 라마도 르메겐 잡아도 섬지미 잡으셔 저장가 알라마인 시지 쇼지게 배 지가서 쇼지에 섬대 많이 마지 캥지 많이 봐 알라마 임신 쇼지만 콤되어 많이 봐 또는 전에 배 헬티 쇼지래샤 릴레이션데 저장가 공글라마데게니 동네 람도 아니 롱베 당마지 고도 당마 용주 송로지 예스지지 아니 얘기 예 송도와 디겐기 첸데 월도와 저장가 겐데 도시 송면도 전병에 자외라메들 송용도 시들 에디 통도가 시부지가 아니 제르무치가 원에 인지무치 쓰들라 더던더는 마 슝네 시웨이나 동네 람도 롱베 당마 융두시 중나 송발라스 랑제 템베 잘라베사 다디 쓰글이야 뭐 시부지도 랑제스도 캐람다부지나스 라마 쳇다부지 임베이나 템베 잘라베스 다디 구주 시부지어레 딩니 디시 쇼르슈 안 줍신 두벌레 미오메스 디보도 다디 구주 침보 가려요 슬라베이나 캐랑 라마 캐 알로 숭킨 캐랑 더블라지 차샤베이나 템베 잘라베스도 템베 자와세디 가르스고래 템베 자warnebi 아니 게롱스고래 템자 게롱세디 준주나로 요래 템자 게롱 니는 게롱이 약가베네 시지 지금로단 마송제 템자 템베 자와 게롱세디 템베 자와 게롱세디 게롱이는 템베 자와 주비 게롱이 비켜고 말레스 템베 자와 게롱세디 돈이 통행기 아니 디주고요래 가르스고래 다 게롱스고래 계획신이 주고요래 제장가 키에다부지 다 라마 키에다부지 임비나 아니 슝침부 망부시 아니 지 가르스고래 아니 거기에 싸워보라는야 구조당 투견식이 아니 기우지 샤디유도 캐란 라야 디 예 지기 슈비나양 해 믹스스 케요 말에 서버스 케요 말에 줍심베 시드즘베 캐란 킹기 요래 캔차베 슈골라 예 요 라베이네 지 사바 코야스 케요 말레스 줍신 주발레 미오메스 다 웬강스 이나양스 베야고도 왔도 이나양스 까젤 미자베 치르도스 케랑그 송베디 송차바 다가란 게 말이야 편 이제 뒤에기 편도 주요. 세상을 든지 편도 유여가 될 다랑을 삼니 인라마치랑 깜만도 배치도 아니 뒤에 뒤에 비도지 뒤에 뒤에 오실도가
Okay, so and so this is originally the teaching was requested by Dharma Friends of Israel, including Gila and Iki and many of the and they requested us to have a kind of to have a Dharma teaching or a Dharma meeting, a gathering of all of us for a Dharma teaching for me to teach. And so I think it was I was down at Bodh Gaya taking teachings from His Holiness at the recent teaching of His Holiness down in Bodh Gaya on the where His Holiness was teaching the praise of Dharma Dhatu, and so I was down in Bodh Gaya and taking that wonderful teaching from His Holiness, and then I was thinking about so they had requested me to different Dharma Friends of Israel requested me to give this teaching on a few instructions on taking suffering into the path from Jay Rinpoche. So I sort of read a little bit of the text. I was unfamiliar with the text and read a little bit of it, and then took a few notes, or made a few notes to myself, and then I went down to the stupa to be around the stupa, and then I was thinking about the way that the text it unfolds from the very beginning of the text, where it says that if in the English it says, a virtuous friend or another Lama asked me once that it would be good if there were a short summary of the practice of taking suffering into the path. And so that's so Jay Rinpoche was requested by another Lama who I think the name is I'm not sure if the name is down. Yes, I'm not sure. I think it might be the name at the bottom of the text. Anyway, there's another Lama who is requesting Jay Rinpoche in order to ask Jay Rinpoche to made a request to Jay Rinpoche to teach on the subject of taking suffering into the path. And so one thing is sort of very so there is very interesting sort of what this indicates by this by Jay Rinpoche saying a virtuous friend once asked me to talk on a summary of taking suffering onto the path is actually it sort of implicitly gives us a feeling of a kind of great relationship, a very healthy, a strong relationship between the teacher and the student in this particular case. And I'm not saying this with a lot of pride, but I also feel that perhaps being requested by Dharma Friends of Israel to give the also I don't mean this as a me being a great Lama or something, but just in the sense that I feel that we have a healthy relationship, and so a good healthy relationship between the teacher and the student. So this is a sort of a very positive thing. And then and so I liked the way that this so then I liked the way that this kind of the text starts like this, and then it says, since we already have the corpus of these teachings, it's inappropriate to create something into addition to what already exists. So this is also something which I like, this way of saying things very much, because what it says is that there's a sort of big meaning in this, in the sense that what Jay Rinpoche is saying is that it says the corpus of the teachings, but actually that also can be read as saying the root of the teachings. I'm also sort of reading it a little bit like the root of the teachings, and Dembe Sala, or the body of the teachings. And in some way you can take that, you can interpret that or take that to mean so it's saying this is Jay Rinpoche speaking, and he says that it would be inappropriate for me to say something which already exists, because there are all of these, the great texts that have gone, the words of the Buddha and the great texts that have gone before. So it's saying, but also there's a way of taking this, which is also mentioned in Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva, where it's the root of the body of the teachings is often said to be the those who were fully ordained. So fully ordained Gelong, as we call Gelong, the fully ordained monks. And they are also sometimes described, I think it's in the Bodhicharavatara, as being a place of joy, a place of happiness or joy, a sort of root, a body or root of happiness, of joy. And but then within that, we can also, when that phrase is used, it's called Denbei, I think it's Denbei Sawa, not Denbei Sala. When that phrase is used, it's also when they talk about fully ordained monk who is the root of the teachings, we're not talking about, we're talking about those who have actually understood emptiness. So we're talking about that kind of thing. So and those who have understood what the root of samsara is, and who know how to to know what to do in order to remove it, and have understood emptiness and the root of samsara, and therefore and then J. Rinpoche says, however, in order not to go against this request, he feels that he must say something, and therefore, seeing some benefit to giving this teaching, he goes ahead, even though so many things have been said before, in order to fulfill the request.
삼국지에서 템베 짜와 세도 된담배 결혼 세야지 돈이 도배 결혼 세들이 되는 신 단다 지름치기 처럼 아니 동번이 콘도 주니기 인기부 타바지 차득 요레스 다디 구주지 요레 안경 아주 직세로 당고도 되라 가르 고고도스네 딘지기 당만 유무지기 송로치 송년들이야 라마디기 강존에다 직심쟁 란도 손로부지를 편도 여버도 쓰기 요르데 이나야 디리지 가르치는 송구 요르스라도 다 아주 마선의 슝침부도 야보지 하고 같이 대견 돌랑 두두도 야보 현섭이 쇼라 당아죠 베나 람주 남숨 손로부지 베나 람주 남숨 손로부디 아니 저부가 안 타발이야 저런부지기 아니 다 막 렌즈고 나지 다 삼로동나 디숨간로 komgemde 소문나 신체제 달라마디게 다가라 네 당만 용우지 나로나 송도점be 다 슝침부 참아 식사요 쉬고나 domde부터 와 디나신 나데 템베 잘라세 디 템베 자와세 디 내가 청어진 곳 출제비 쉬고라 아니 당마디 고백이나 대바디 여버지 대바디 가르스나 슝침부도 저때 딜이야 선모에 도주코 딜을 장바 여대버지 도시 대바 여대니지 강사지기 아니 냠브리나 대바디 지단에 아주 대바 여세 지고 마연바 대바 수도 점be 슝 첨부당 튼비고 공과도 튼비기 대바디 여대버 강라 아니 신에 마다 지기 지단에 당화하게 신이디 고대와당 보된 달라도 또 봤어요. 달라도 또 봤어. 남상도 토야지. 오 근데 남상도 또 봤대. 그거 쇠 잡으래. 다이네 라마게 타지도 막 도스레도가 시지 막 손인데 아니 소수균 영화데 인데 지네 또 발서고래 소리지네 소화제 되게 지갑라. 아니 라메게 소화데 막 내용도 전에 딱딱 소환이 같은데 신은 남아 고해지래도 와. 어디인데 디잉 안 줘야 간도지네. 왕원발을 지난소 당화 지년도였나? 이심이진년도야. 당마년로 로고에 가시죠. 그래서 또 지게 하고 좀 고추지지니 당화学비는 당화 다다 고투해진스레.
Then this is and then so in terms of here I was mentioning this word, this denbe sala, or denbe sawa, the root of the kind of base or the root of the teachings. And here we're talking about when it was mentioned that it was the root of the teachings is the kind of it's the fully ordained monk, or the full ordination. But then that has to be qualified a little bit, because it's in order to, not every fully ordained monk would be considered what's talking about here is the root of the teachings, the base of the teachings. So then we have to sort of qualify by that by saying that they're an ultimate what we'd call an ultimate or a fully ordained monk, which is to say that somebody who's realized emptiness. And so then when we're looking at looking into this a little bit more, what we see is that when we're into this text where it talks about a small number of instructions on how to taking suffering onto the path. So this is a small number of instructions, but actually there are behind all of this. Why would J. Rinpoche? What is J. Rinpoche trying to teach, or why would he be teaching these things? And what you'll find, for instance, in the three principal aspects of the path, where at one point, J. Rinpoche says that you cultivate these states of mind, such as renunciation, bodhicitta, and understanding of emptiness, and then at some point you rely on a sort of deep meditation on those. So this also kinds of what this sort of shows us a little bit is that there's a background that is required for us in order to understand the text here, so that and this it requires a faith in order to engage in that, but it also requires not just a kind of basic faith, but a basic faith which is a faith which is in the context of understanding that having a quite a background understanding in the teachings. So if you're talking about at the top is talking about a kind of ultimate fully ordained person who has realized the truth of emptiness. And so so it also has an implication that there's a lot to be understood in the background of before. This is a kind of short amount of instructions, but there's a lot of background that needs to be understood before someone can to completely take on understand these things. So, and we need faith, but the faith also has to be that faith which is underpinned with a lot of understanding. One of the etymologies of instructions, or dhamma, as it's called, the instructions or pith instructions or personal instructions, is that they're supposed to be, in some sense, easy, or easy to understand, easy to bring into our practice. But that's a little bit there's a little bit more background to it than all of these things. So, for instance, the way that in which these instructions actually kind of transmitted is there's some kind of experience or feeling with inside. There's an experience and probably realization or feeling with inside the guru, and also then there's also some kind of understanding, experience, or feeling within the student, and then there is a way in which those two experiences or feelings are able to meet. This is the kind of way that the pith instructions take place, and then that's when the instructions are conveyed and we're able to understand. So there's a lot. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, because it has this background of the corpus of the teaching, which is and so in a sense we should have to try to understand the depth of that corpus of teachings in order to help us understand what's going to be said.
מאחר ויש לנו את אוסף, יש לנו את הבסיס של אוסף שיעוריו של הבודה, זה אומר שיש לנו מורה רוח, לא רק מורה רוח, אלא מורה רוח, כאן למה צונקפה מדבר על המורה שלו שהגיע להבנה נכוחה של הריקות ויש לו אמונה במורה הזה, האמונה הזאת גם מסתייעת בלימוד מפורט של הטקסטים הקנונים. אז זאת גישה שגם אנחנו רוצים לפתח בעתיד, באמונה, במסגרת הגישה שאנחנו נפתח כלפי מורי הרוח שלנו, השיעורים שאנחנו מקשיבים להם. בסולה.
다음에 중시샤 마시나 디스르나 사타 돌디드스나 등의 랑도 셀와니스 니지르바차데 디들 등의 민두별로 로바단 데네 등의 람도 랑와서 시샤 다 등의 람도 셀와 세딜로 고아디 등의 람도 아니야 켈용야 등의 람도 배주 땅기스 다 등의 람도 배주 땅이야 마당용을야 아니 균일라고도스 다 저러듯이 냠용송도가就是아니 디 니기돈 제고도스 니디 가르레스나 아니 대달 등의 민두별로 또 바탕스 아니 어란절 그도도 아라운솔의 동행주 중부에는 딥만 까야라는 게 답이지 그러 마도 지기 디 뭐가 지금 안저를 중송스 디 용고야지 메스 나도 고기 메시지 söylenen sosore 영어야 소수 제들리고요래 디가 고구메 하는 아주 레버도 현 돌고요 봐 다디가 그래서 당고디 동해지 게 용들 점비 동해지 버디 생기 게 제법 좀 시래 마도 동해기 다기리 진행이 로디 다고 점이 된 하라랑 그랬어 델려야 때네 아니 니지 충충 시dimbe 이나야 첨부쇼 삼로 써야 되니디 하라랑 있어 어딘데 인도점비 딘제디 아니 동해리아 동해 체단디 아주 마소네 까담벨라만 좀 나시 아니 동해디 디그리스 게야디 가르스나 아주다 아주 베나 슝따베이나 베나 아주 리감나로라 아주 디가서레 대다양다세 주고요 봐 저부 따서 그렇지 아니 중문을 줘도 왔어 저부 연구를 봤어 디양의 양도 공시된 것도 봐니 야고도 와 시험하라는 소제 타면 봤어도 저것들 남산 동해지 퇴차받아 아니 배 현토네 세미나를 못 준대 지금도 와 당원에 사모야 뭐지 땅 토베이나 아니 동해 친구지 단다 독스 채용이야디 크도 그런 독스 지지마 대벽해 말이 디 주데 게망보 사와지 도스테니마 레셔주치레 가전선하고 디부르 봤어 규메버는 디부 끼고한테 세치 제장가 디디기 아니 삼로딜레온도 점베 아니 아주 마소네 인지게 마소 acceptance 디 당부 sö고도 루스 디 람도 마치병원에 제장가 acceptance 디 가져 야 친구이나 근데 미마손에 가서 그래 동의 준비값이야 동의 제출이 베나가다 벨라마 찍 된데 손으로 봐 찍 종샤 지지 거기 전에 깨버려 봤어 동을 봤어 선문을 그둘레 두고 봐 람사 시그레 세디스 숍데스 캠메버 가진 계속 타면 시규를 봐니 시벨 뉴스 캠마로 왔어 들려도 봐 아니 뭐지 나셔난 나그로 봐 사진이 원래 몇 풍부 체제버려 봐 나그로 봤어 아니 도시를 온데 밀라나 밀 파종어디 가서래 틀리더니 메디 최다 최기 도단데다 액셉턴스 시다 메디니지나 디티들 라베나 고 갈시고 삼삼로지 요래데 이네 최버지 용어라 삼로 땅베나 준주의 딘중 삼보야고 여디니 지기 삼로텔라 용초그르스 게 초그르스 초그르스 해야 돼 삼로 중에 쓰고도스 dinheiro de estudar.
בוא נמשיך.
And so, and then, so looking at the text then, reading, so after it says, he says, however, in order to not go against your request, I will give you a summary. So Rinpoche then offers the Lama who requested the text, he says to him, you should understand that combining suffering with the path has 2 points. Overcoming the mind that does not want suffering, and then the actual part of taking suffering into the path. So in a sense, these are what they're saying to us. So the suffer taking suffering onto the path has this sense in which we have to use it. We take it upon ourselves and we use it. But before that practice or process can occur, we have to have 2 sort of almost like causes, which is the overcoming the mind that is, so it's like the overcoming, there are 2 phases of it. First of all, the overcoming of the mind that does not want the suffering, and then the actual practice of taking it onto the suffering, which leads to the result of that practice. So there's the 2 almost like causes or points which have to be understood before the full practice. And our normal, a sort of normal person's way of operating is we always have this sense that when things, negative things, difficulties, sufferings, that they come to us, that we have this sense immediately of that we don't need them. They're not wanted. We don't need them. I don't need this. That we sort of try to, really to sort of push them away and get rid of them and that sense in which we don't, it's almost like sort of not taking responsibility for them as well. But one important facet of this, is that so we're not understanding that they come from they come from other causes, and that other causes created by ourselves, and therefore we're not taking responsibility for them. So then what happens is that small causes lead us in small suffering states of small conditions of suffering, then lead us into a much greater sense of suffering and being overwhelmed, and the wish not to have to deal with it, in the sense that we we don't, it's nothing to do with us, or we don't take responsibility or want it. But that's how the ordinary people operate. But if we look at the way in which the Kadam Lamas, for instance, would and this is also, you can also draw some understanding also from the sort of the texts which deal with the sort of path of reasoning and the understandings of things like valid signs, and in particularly in there's one particular kind of valid sign which is called the resultant valid sign, or the sign of the resultant valid sign, or the sign of which is a result. And from the results of something, you can imply that you can infer that the cause has to have already preceded it. So we just, ordinary people just kind of get upset and unhappy at and overcome by or overwhelmed is the best word for by the things. But if we understand, if we have this broader perspective where we understand that even the smaller sufferings, and of course the greater sufferings, they all come, it's kind of realistic thinking where we understand that they all come from many different kinds of causes and conditions, and that the results which we are receiving, which is this suffering which we face, that even if they're small sufferings, are not causeless. They without those causes and conditions, that result will not arise. Without the causes and conditions in place, the result will not arise. And there's a sense of acceptance. We need a sense of acceptance and this is before taking this is the process that we have to go through before the actual taking of the suffering onto the path. Is we need this greater acceptance within inside of ourselves as to how, you know, this particularly and this understanding in relation to how results, the unwanted result which we've got in front of us, the suffering, is created by causes and conditions. And again, there is stories from the Kadam Lama, one of the Kadam Lamas, where, you know, when the Kadam Lama is told that somebody's died, it's not news to them. They're not shocked. They don't, because they immediately think, well, the person was born, so the cause is birth, the result is death. And so in the same way, if you're sick, you know, talking about being sick, you know, saying getting sick, well, yeah, you get sick because you've taken up the contaminated aggregates. You've appropriated these suffering aggregates, so it's no surprise. So there's this but without acceptance, we're not able to. And some of that acceptance is lent to us by understanding the dependently originated relationship between cause and effects. And so things could arise, things are possible, whereas we tend to think they're not.
כשאנחנו חושבים על זה, אפשר לקרוא לזה באנגלית acceptance, או לקבל את הסבל שאותו אנחנו חווים עכשיו. וזה הדבר שאנחנו עושים קודם כל, אנחנו מקבלים את הסבל הזה, מקבלים אותו או לוקחים אותו על עצמנו.
So there's this, Yaki's, so there's this an understanding of the dependent origination of the understanding of the dependent origination at the level of causality, where there's a relationship between cause and effect, and understanding this relationship between cause and effect, and therefore such things as because we have the suffering aggregates, we are going to get sick, and because someone is born, they will die. If we're able to draw these relationships, then we're no longer kind of completely shocked or taken by surprise by you know, such things as the sufferings that we face, because there is a more of an inevitability about them.
אנחנו מסתכלים על הסבל, הכאב, המצוקות שאנחנו חווים, לדוגמה, כמשהו שמתהווה בתלות, dependent arising, כהתהוות בתלות. זה הדבר הראשון שאנחנו עושים, אנחנו מתגברים או מפסיקים את התודעה שהיא לא מסוגלת להתמודד עם סבל, כזאת שנכנסת לשוק או להלם. קודם כל אנחנו מקבלים את הסבל הזה, ואז אנחנו מתרגלים טכניקות להתמודד עם הסבל. לעשולה.
몰랐어. 다때는 이바디 되네 동에 람도노 응여서 다디 니바디체. 다지장 규디 두고를 시디 니아버도 말하는 sem나로 양 아주 참참 말하는 미 시간이야. 어디리 진설에 했으면 남산 제대로 봐. 다디 아주 마소는 인지게 마소는 록 타이트 록 제야라야. 아니 니아버도 니버디 개침부 찌기여나 니버 응시 디 등에 람도 키야디 개침부 찌기여나 되게 응연들은 야바도 등열을 면도별로된 노고야 돼. 근데 개침부 찌고도 스틱 야바도 좀 원도서야 돼. 아주 차 말한주다 지금 첨부로 지금 빼나 지금 가서 참 무시도 마대고 말이야. 아니 오늘 당구를 해서 열어봐. 그래서 오늘도 좋다. 개침부 차고에 가서 오늘도 가수야 뭐 슈잡이나 무시디 뷰타가다 야 연구였어. 그 개침부 차야 되지래도 와. 되는 점에 dig 아주 능조 맞지 알레 되지 고기에 세례에서 좀 뭐 인지민지 고독서야 돼. 제가 상관. 매는 민중이 되었지. 다들 오늘 개침부를 했어. 디벤도 연구보라만 스타체체 아니 야바도 아니 다 동네 람도 케야야 야바도 아니 동네야 민두별로 남주 나신 타면비가 샘딩이 짜와니니 지금에 동행지를 총바다 동행도 용초그리 용고기리 가진서는 주되긴 림로 차로 봐 림로 차비 슈고르데 용그로 봐세 때문에 당내치기 때문에 답에 들으셔가지고 또 다디 월은 단대지름 지기 답지 중으로 봐
And that what I've just spoken about previous to that was covering the first aspect in the sense of overcoming the mind, the first kind of section, overcoming the mind that does not want suffering. And then it goes on to say, and then the actual or the main meat of the practice, the actual part of the practice of taking suffering into the path. What we have to do is be very careful, and this is a general advice specifically related to this, though, is that we have to, we have to take there is a tendency to sort of rush on to the main body of the practice and skip past the kind of earlier kind of advice and instructions. And so we may be tempted to sort of, flick quickly through the sense of overcoming the mind that does not want suffering and then move on to the actual practice, think that we're moving on to the actual practice of taking suffering into the path. But we need to take this first, the first sort of section of this practice, overcoming the mind that does not want suffering, is an extremely important part of this process, and we need to overcome, remove, to counteract, and to put an end to that kind of mind that does not want suffering. And then before we actually can effectively move on to the actual part of taking suffering into the path. So so in a sense that this is like other forms of practice, like doing preliminary practices for other than let's say more advanced practices. But so however great the strength of preliminary practices, that strength leads into our practice of the actual main body of our practice. So they are definitely needed. There is no question of them being needed, and in fact, these kind of practices have the preliminary practices related to actual main body of practice have a relationship which is called Maiden Michungwe Droa, where if the first does not arise, there's no possibility. If the first is not in place and doesn't exist, the later practice will not occur at all. And there's a relationship there that the first has to arise in order for the possibility of the later practice to arise. So we should not sort of skip by these earlier practices. And so very important so that relationship, the definitive relationship between the two, and we should be very careful, therefore, to not fall into the kind of the ordinary ways of thinking, which are worried about the ordinary ways of thinking where we are not able to overcome the mind that wants suffering, and that we need a kind of courage to be able to do that. La.
coffee day 7-Eleven coffee then they yaposh la mindo
7-Eleven.
Okay. That's nga ngondo dang ngoshi ni di dawa ya go suma to na ngazu mizi na lo ta la me yu sungju tomman de shuji simgyu le ma phen ya de ngazu ma so ne ngondo dang ngondo ro de ya go chung ngondo dang ngoshi di so so nyam len che ya de re dini poro le 참데 딱다지 뭐 총비네 니 루주지 셰고 nga regita 미지나로라 통딱 통제 용주지 나라랑게 초와요래란 배낭알로 쭉시 쥐어가지 임베요 드레지깔이야 아니면 이게 로저를 겨울을 붙이기 세라데로 숨주지 나왔어. 그 숨주 니마 패진 뒤도 니슈다란지 나왔어. 다 뒤도 나도 겨워서 그래. 니 숨주 샤번 니슈다란지 숨주도 나. 테네 다 샤번 니슈다란 슈굴랑 아주 봐 세라네 봐 간데를 봐 도고 봐 주주 아 주정아주 도그래. 테네 요런 거 도고도 다 텍실라요. 텍실라도 아주 베베 메지 텍실라치 아니 되네 텍시디 베베 포사딩 아주 오심버리 되네 코로나 아주 텍시라 코로나 예미 심바지게 야 구쇼딘디게 야 텍시 라요서리 코로나 라이서리 코로나기 니가로 디그리스 랍도가 코로나기 슈고라 코로나 아주 잘래 아니 구쇼즈 아주 틸레레지 아니 아주 얘기 쉽지다 아니 미샴바도 잘으셔 텍시 된다라 되네 다 잘으셔도 좀 되네 디 아말라지 베베 아말라지 용지 오즈 구다 초보냐에서 구쇼르 봐 아니 오지 구쇼라 저 초보마지 등한조 야와른 비제자네 송주 슈차즈르 봐 근데다 나기 요르베스 랍송아 anga amal 나와 시다로송 오네 아말라고 송고 데마레 체인지요 이네 구쇼지기 가르송 구쇼디 가르송 안틸라 아마들라 야와른 비제 송야디 코란 송야디 레사 이네야 나중 가라도 제야디 제거로만도 텍스라고 버렸어 이거 제장가 라면 송야디다 아니 미국 콘도사디 잠베 딜레가 메디어선도지 라면 송샤주디 아샤 소소 제거에도 제대로선도지 제장가 원가도 다투 미지데오디 지기 그래서 우리 순주 님비가로 이나야 딘디지 마체나 니 딘디지 마체나 니 녀모도 손을 카데 딘디지 짜와를 딘디지 마체나 오늘도 딘디지 마초나 지마송 세디 자와딩아 저 짜와니는 스마트 잠베 아니 알아줘 망체 지금 또 단다 봐도 알아줘 또 비즈니스 스크린 디나로 유미 망체 취어 또나 디슈 차이어다 단다 봐도 이나야 녀모도 손을 레레 끼려는데 잠베 그런 게 대전 로가직당 취슈의 대전 로가 손으로 차로도 와 디인도 잠베 냐발도 취디 슈야디 가르치도 슈여서도 녀모 도숨 디 매버서야다 디마도 탑시면도 디만 면도 세게 어디 이지민진 저서고 변난탄다 디날 제일 뭐지 숨번나시 단다 르바니기 저와티
אנחנו חייבים את החלק המקדים.
So there has to be this real sense of in which so it's very important to draw this relationship. The key point that I want to make here again is to be able to draw this very clear relationship and the importance, here of a preliminary practice of overcoming the mind that does not want suffering and the actual practice of taking suffering onto the path. And this is also, so drawing, understanding the importance and paying attention to the importance of that relationship. And this also we can look at this relationship a little bit, this cause and effect relationship a little bit in relation to teachings that we receive from our gurus, and then the effect or the way that we allow them or don't allow them to affect our actual mind. So there's one thing of taking teachings, and then there's another thing of whether that affects our minds in our life outside of the Dharma teaching. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to relate a little bit of something that happened to me. It was something that was a direct experience of mine from my own life, which took place when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And there was His Holiness was giving a teaching in Sera Monastery in South India. And at that time, the teachings were probably, I think, about 20 days long. So amazing for us to have such great merit to be able to receive such lengthy teachings from His Holiness. So after the teaching had finished, because I'm from Ganden Monastery, which is about 10 hours drive away from Sera, so there was a group of us, including my attendants and another monk, who had kind of booked a taxi in order to get back to Ganden Monastery from Sera. And but as it happened, so we had booked this one taxi, but as it happened, there was another someone else or another group of people who had also booked that same taxi too. And so I was there with some of my attendants and this other monk, and we kind of got into a bit of an argument or a fight over the taxi because both groups of people wanted to take this taxi back from Ganden to Sera. And so there's a bit of a ruckus, a bit of a disturbance between us. And then there on the side, I think there was one elderly Tibetan woman. And of course, there were two groups of monks, I think, and an elderly Tibetan woman. And the elderly Tibetan woman said to the monks, "Aren't you a little bit disgraced with yourself? We've just taken teachings from His Holiness, and here you are arguing over a taxi." And I thought to myself, I think that what the elderly Tibetan woman is on to something here. I think she's probably got the truth here. She's probably right. But one of the other monks that we were with turned around to the elderly Tibetan woman and said, "Oh, what His Holiness talks in the teachings is one thing, and what we have to do to get on with our lives is another." And so I was quite shocked that there was this this kind of sense of the teachings, the teachings, and then the rest of our lives, should we call it like that, as being two completely separate things. So we have to make sure that, again, drawing this relationship between the teachings that we receive from our gurus, the Dharma teachings that we receive from our gurus, and the sort of our lives outside once we leave that teaching, and that within those teachings, or as soon as the teachings are finished, we should have this sense of that, drawing this relationship between the two, and so of understanding that, saying to ourselves things like, if I don't do this, it's not is really not okay. Drawing certain pointing to ourselves and saying, if I don't do these particular things, then it's really not going to be okay. So drawing that relationship between what we've taken from the teachings and bringing it into our daily lives. So and we are people here who've studied for a long time. We have, obviously, and probably different, all kinds of different lives and different, but it's very important that we draw the relationship between trying to remove the three poisons and not allowing them to come into our lives. And that's what, so that relationship between the teachings and trying to reduce the three poisons in our minds. And that is the same as the relationship here between overcoming the mind that does not want suffering and taking suffering into the actual part of taking suffering into the path.
다 금세 가르쳐 올스나 다 단다디 나로려야 말한주 생기 마소네 다 저지도 마소네 동엘이야 아니 지가르소래 아니 당아주 동예 때스 차보단 게 잡초조 쳐야다 아니 동예 체류배 현라도 토로야 돼 또전 용으로 마당 나왔어 있어래 근데 마체베이나 텔라 아니 세레세야디 간주단도 준주 측지용 것도 준주 측난다야 아니 준주 그상 아주 리우든베 도와지 로주총 저는 준주 리우든베 나려야 세르진 내려망 세주어 세르스도 그 동해를 쓰면 투니기 서버 메디니기 로고 충충 제나스 어떤지 지어서 동해를야 가져 로고 충 체체 동해를 셰딩에 손으로 체대베이나 아니 되게 괜찮지 김미데와 펠비기레스 이 미데와 망로로 그랬어 대즈만디 떠는 게 그냥 차샤베나 아 캐나다야 로가지 로정진 데브리 되는 수다를 내용도 좀be 까니로 당고디 가르도스나 까니로 니로 지고도 당고디 까니 가르도스지만 남다는마 대용도 좀be 되는 배 모터도 저기 땡땡땡땡 디스게 초쇼고기 어따베 암조나로를 큐니 배 수나 쉬우지게 용해지 딩에기 가르전스나 캐나다야 땡땡 지에메베 인자 딜베 심 차지 대디어자 아니 대지 땡땡 라바다 아니 배 모르서도 봐 대단히 시계래야 아니 모두 땡 직잡이나 아니 배 미배 니마가 뭐지 비치지 그만 벤스 제제디 혼 잡수 모두와 직제 단이버디 람다 룩스도 주르바 다 가디이네 코 야부쳐버렸어 게임쇼버렸어 아니 배 그렇지 망고지 팀 망고지 쇠샤보다 팀 망고 쇠야데 상말로 소소 까니에 마요행 치도 까니 내가 충충충충 까야게 쳐도마도 까니 친구 까야게 된다라 상로마담체 아니 테즈 까니디 까토 얘기 된다라 빼나 지기 자샤베나 다 나로지 인도점베 디 자갈레온도 점베 당고디 캐나다를 딜람도 저디 야고도 미용고레온도 점베 빼나 상한로지나 고치온도 미지용고도나 고데람상 유비메도가 아니 미샤바 용년들이야 또 고치 고 바스테 그 땡큐 슬라가치 뭐안로도와 땅가 자갈레도 점베 lum스로스디 체르다 근데 제대로 점베디 상한안에 미테온도 베 진지기 베 미톱 친구시거든요 미고르다고 하면 알아 땡큐지도 개그하면도 미고르다고 하면 아니 남미 방되는 전산 단정 알아보 쓰면 되르샤 한가로 शुगर समझता हूँ वा ये दी काले खाया थी ये कंट्रोल या कोचे ने काले खाया जो दी 파종은 appreciation 때마 송하세 디쳐도 나자디 대인들 잠베 아 지질 로네 아또 수업 차래 아 야가랑 내도 잠베 섬르지 가르고 수업 차야디 가르치는 차샤스도 잠베 말이야 레와 싸워지 델로 야가래 메디니 레와 싸워지 피는 라브레 이 가르에서는 appreciate 하고 그랬어. emotion 그랬어. thank you 라고 그랬어. 이 야가리요 말 봐. 대두 딱 되는 것은 또 스타로도. 어디인도 좀 고말레 콜람단 로수요 간인데 레온도 좀 아니 아주 중중 이제 중도 뭐지 친구들 잘 로야디 용야디 가르를 샤래도 조디 가르칠 수도 동엘이야 아니 등이 충중로 미수요 로디 빵토메도스 대인도 잠베 대점지 이미 되어 여기 가서다 여기 나도 와 이미 되어 페벌 들이 동라스 텔라데니 아니 유튜브에 시당 페베 치마를 페베에서 치마를 디비 준도 메베 동안제 비치르스 다 마음발라 까니데 단다고네 또 세나마도 그 마음으로 로선 베이나 아니 슈글지 까고서는 까마도 차요 그래서 여기다 가디 있습니다.
오케이.
고동해.
거기도.
오케이. 안디 주나다냐.
למה צונקאפה מתחיל בהתגברות על תודעה שאינה
and so and so we need to so then the text reads on and it talks about your incapability of tolerating suffering accords with the increase of your unhappiness to the point that it torments you in this life. So that's the first, and then it uses this word called sere in Tibetan, which has a sense of it's a kind of sense of being unable to tolerate small difficulties, impatience or of an inability to tolerate small difficulties, a kind of lack of patience. And this inability to tolerate sufferings increases our will naturally increase our happiness until we're completely tormented by it. And so obviously that we need to be able to reduce this inability, or to increase the ability, but reduce the incapability of being able to tolerate suffering. And this is also mentioned in the Shantideva, the 7th chapter of, I don't know the verse, but it's mentioned in Shantideva, the 7th chapter of the Way of the Bodhisattva, where it talks about the harm that comes from not being able to not being able to cope with, and not being able to withstand or forbear small sufferings. And so this is a sense in which we, in terms of taking on the suffering, we have this is something that this is very important for us to understand. So it says, depending on that, your continuum becomes increasingly disturbed by hostility. So this drives us to get more and more upset, to the point that the torments of this life cannot be compared with the torments this will bring in the future lives. So I have a little bit of personal experience with this, and in the sense of the inability to take on the suffering becoming a cause which then reduces our own happiness. And as you will know, many of you will know, I went to Canada to study for several years. And when I returned to India, it was very clear to me almost immediately on arrival in India that I arrived in the airport back in India after several years away, and the noise, I couldn't abide at all the noise of the horns of the taxis and the cars and the vehicles outside the airport, because I've been away for a long time studying in Canada, and this would hardly occur. It wouldn't occur in this way at all, and hardly would be any of this use of horns and kind of, and so I could hardly abide it at all, and I was unable to sort of bear it at all. And also, so that was one thing. So I could see, and then there was another thing was in terms of cultural habits of following kind of rules and regulations. And normally rules and regulations are designed in order to reduce difficulties, or to create less friction, or to reduce difficulties. And but of course, sometimes the rules and regulations are, of course, sometimes rules and regulations are designed to only really sort of overcome what we would call small difficulties, and they don't necessarily tackle some of the larger difficulties. But in India, those kind of cultural habits are, and sometimes they're a bit kind of rougher than the kind of general conduct of people in Canada tends to be. They tend to follow the rules and the sort of kind of socially understood conduct, perhaps, but at least differently. But one very good example is when in Canada, what they would have the habit, and Western countries often have the habit of when you go into a restaurant or a shop or something like that, then it tends to be you're holding the door open for someone so that someone else can come through, allowing them through, or and then maybe you'll pass the door to someone else or something like that. But there's that care to do that. And I remember I was somewhere in India, maybe Delhi or something, and I did that, and there was a great big person who kind of barged through the door and didn't look at me at all, didn't say thank you at all, didn't show any sign of awareness or appreciation. And if you stay there long enough, you can hold the door open forever as people just walk through. And I think a whole family kind of proceeded through as I stood there with that. And then I kind of got tired of all of this. And what had happened is that I feel I'd gone soft. In Canada, I'd got soft because I was tired, because there was no appreciation, and I had developed this new hope from living in the West, a new kind of hope, and gone a little bit soft. And you'll be glad to know that since I've been in India, I've recovered from this habit a little bit, and you can see how I was creating my own unhappiness, and therefore we need to get rid of this inability to bear small sufferings. Otherwise, in the future, it'll get worse.
나서 다 누구 잠베 다디야 내가 전부 찍 가지고 다 슈궁하려 가지고 하이라이트 지그래 돼 말하는 세미나로 하이라이트 지하고야 그 치슈더데 제장가 에 동예 때스 간이 차보다 남사 아니 이 메디어디 남사 사렌더 마시비체 오고 녀레 찍고 완전 손에 간이인데 쇠도 쓰고 말데 이내 셈 해보지 샤체 아니 고 간이디 용루 용당당 아니 간이디 셀탑 유당 매세 상로 당당 대변나 준주고 나로로 숨분하신 걔도 주스 요리요 말에 걔도 주스 요나 아니 가르치니 셈보 마가 진디기 주스면 안에 셈보 마지 진디는 도jó로 봤으니 손로시 고 빼야고도 봐 너도 측도 야랑 온주점be 고 아주마 손에 들으셔 셈기 kumchidi 짱마 시비 돼야지 빼나가라는 저기 치료를 가진 여비나 안 치료 가진 나로야 짱망고 시부지 기에 대회나 답에 저는 지금 나망보 로망보 지고 나는 마요한 그 내가 치고도 남상 통도 고란에 셈을 깔려 가야지 맵스를 깔려 가야지 용그리 이나양 다지고 니们또네 대디니 지나 빼나던 지기 된다르르르르 코 지기 장마 수빈 체베인 코 공시자만 저러도 공시자인데 코 남게 해 매버스 개요 말와 개요 말와 대 연구를 와 진루로 와 세야디 디 준비 있나 알아서 지딩디 미비 고란나로야 드린 것은 미카시 통주도가 다시 간이 가지고 체베이네 콜헬로 대두도가 그 가르치는스나 간이 쳐버들 단들에데 얘네 그 셈기 나로려야 이마다 버릇이 용구를 다티 뒤누를 개요 말했어야지 그 셈나로 자와제도 같지만 손에 디 캐주디 여자 그 셈나로 남서 셈 부수토야 되면도와 내가 신지다 단도 제로부치 숨겨하래 제장가 그 친구 마차고 공을 셈나로를 빼 가르쳐 버려 찍기 information 망고 마사옹네 information 테스트 중부터 엔티티 개요 말에 세야 돼 개요 말에 세도 잠베 지단에 개차마 송세 개제도 멤비체 개요 말에 세 섬로 코단들이야 단다디나시 고 규디리지 태용비 규디리지 여베는 저거들이 개 초고로 봐 세야 돼 아니 아주 될래야 동네 체단디 유매버스에 도금이도 딜러 큰지 딜러 마가친데는 캡상 여대매 두 개다 경험이 있으면단지 아니 셈마 별로 샤야디 장고도와 저는 it doesn't matter 세디 sig디 신의 아주 만라선으로 차나 아니 야고도와 디지긴 사리 준두메베 세디 sig디 구주 친구시도 준두메베 세디 젠다 체마 돈이 손으로 지어다 젠다 체마 도지 예 제투사 말에 세 섬로디 망고 차용디 sem기 꼬라마고 이만들이야 아니 준두메 또 더 야와를 붙이 손으로 붙이 차샤베나 준두메베기 까녀요 말이 가리 임비이나야 겐딘디지 태워나 섬 공부시단 디지기 따다 셈 흘려 샤토니지 다 디지기 딘진 계신시 차들이 여러봐 말하는 저이나야 아니 디난가가 로고 요나 아니 간이 충선이 아니고 지금 네뭐 띵기 시체고 예습 좀 있어요.
And so if we look at if we try to sort of identify what is the point of most importance, that perhaps the things that would be the most difficult for us, that cause us the most dangerous to us, or that highlight what is the main thing that we should be taking away from this, and that is that this way in which really quite small sufferings are able to upset, disturb, and cause our mind to be disturbed and to be unhappy. And we have to find a way in the future to be able to reduce that, to stop ourselves from having small sort of conditions of suffering create great small conditions of suffering create great unhappiness in our minds, and we need what we need at the beginning of this is a kind of relaxed mind that seeing the way that things arise, and sort of understanding the way that things go, that the things arise always from related to causes and conditions. And I also want to relate this to this verse which Rinpoche has put on the screen here, the 10th verse of the 6th chapter on patience, from Chantadeva's Way of the Bodhisattva, where it says, why be unhappy about something when you can do something about it? Why be unhappy about if there's nothing to do? Why be unhappy if there's nothing to do? Why be unhappy if there's something to do? Just do it. If there's nothing to do, then accept it. If there's something to do, I've paraphrased it because it's disappeared. So if there's something to do, do it. If there's nothing to do, accept it. So that is a very important way of helping us to kind of relax our mind a little bit. If there is something to do, we try to do it. If there's something we can have an effect with, if they're not, and I could also, people like to tend to gardens, physical garden, flower gardens, etc. And also we could think about how we tend to the garden of our mind, our mental garden. And when you see, in an ordinary garden, if you just leave the garden for weeks and days and weeks, months and years, then of course it will become overgrown with weeds and many different kind of plants, especially weeds, will kind of take over the garden. And then if you go into the garden after a long time, and if you've allowed it to run wild, then it'll feel very difficult and very difficult. It'll feel a bit hopeless to try and get everything tidied up and under control. But if you go out every day and or every day or regularly on a regular basis, and you tend to the plants and to cut the weeds and generally clean up the garden, then and you train in that habit, then there's this sense where it's no problem to us. Whereas if you go in after months it feels like a real problem. So yeah, so in the same way, tending to our minds in this way of so that things don't get kind of blown out of proportion, and then we end up this habit of sort of tending to things and also employing Shantideva's advice help us to sort of have this sense that we don't get so tense, uptight, and stressed, and we feel that things are not so much of a problem. And this can happen with things like information as well. In small doses, information is very useful, but we can also get overwhelmed. And sometimes we have to just sort of, maybe sort of just say it doesn't matter. It doesn't, something happens. It might be an important and serious situation, but we say it's okay. It doesn't matter. We're trying not to get overwhelmed by it. This is not to deny that there are certain difficult things, or there are suffering or difficult things. We're not denying that, but we're trying to find a way to relax our minds so that we don't take things overly seriously. So this sense in which things don't matter. And in the text it says, depending on that, your continuum becomes increasingly disturbed by hostility, to the point that the torments of this life cannot be compared to the torments of future lives. Here, the suffering, they will be completely out of comparison. They won't be comparable if we become increasingly disturbed by these smaller things. Then that later later and in future, then the torments will become overwhelmingly incomparable to. So this is, and so we see people like His Holiness, although they face many difficulties in their life, they don't get overwhelmed by these. By these conditions, causes and conditions that arise. So we have to train ourselves in order to be able to understand things like the understanding of where suffering comes from and its conditions, and then being able to bear more and more and have a relaxed mind about bearing small sufferings so that they don't give us mental unhappiness.
Okay, we take a coffee break for an hour, and then we meet again. You have a coffee. You don't need a break.
Yeah.
My coffee's finished. I need another one.
Yeah.
Okay, see you.
אוקיי, אז אנחנו לוקחים הפסקה של שעה.
כן, שעה
אוקיי.
אנחנו ב-13:30. So
אוקיי.
we take 1 hour break, be back here, 1:30 p.m. Israel time, or another time, your time zone. So thank you very much, Rinpoche, Venerable Katzen and Simon, and they'll be back here in 1 hour. See you.